the New York Times Learning Network prompts essentially give our students this space to have authentic, timely, real-world conversations with peers across the globe in many ways, and on topics that is of interest to them. AP Language and Composition is about understanding and dissecting one's argument. So this year, when the team met over the summer, we said, okay, what should we prioritize for our students? What's important to us? So we kind of talked about three things. One was that we wanted them to think deeply and write often and write about things that really matter to them. Secondly, we wanted to give them some consistency. We wanted to say, okay, every week you're going to do X. And then really the third, which is kind of at the heart of AP Language and Composition, is that we wanted to make sure that they left the class understanding how to enter into a conversation. So the New York Times Learning Network prompts easily fit all of those three sort of priorities we had for our team.
Something I've learned from doing the Learning Network prompts is to really think through my opinions and to learn to express them thoughtfully and concisely and very specifically.
The student opinion post definitely helped me to kind of gauge where other people are at and kind of express where my feelings are on certain events.
Yeah, I think it really helped me know how to form opinions because you really get different perspectives through the students and even the article.
So we usually get them assigned on Wednesdays, and then we'll have till Friday to complete it. I typically just go on the Learning Network and look at the most recent prompts.
I just kind of choose which prompt is most interesting to me, that's semi-recent, and then just go for that.
There's a lot of freedom with it, where the teacher never tells you exactly what prompt you need to look at or even what type of prompt. I think it's important to make sure that you're responding to a diverse amount of prompts, maybe going politically, maybe more culturally, but there's a lot of freedom when it comes to making the response and putting in the assignment.
I write it right in to the prompt site, and usually what I'll do is I'll write out my response and then I'll look at some of what other people have said, and sometimes I'll add in kind of a summary of what they said and then refute that or support that with some evidence and reasoning.
Personally, I open a Google Doc and I have all the prompts that I've ever responded to on that Google Doc week by week. And I just write out my response there, and then I'll make sure I include some of the key elements our teacher wants us to focus on, and then I'll just copy and paste it onto the site.
I usually write it down physically on a rough paper because I think my thoughts come out better that way.
One thing that I've gained from the Learning Network is that it has allowed me to enter and respond to real life conversations outside of a school setting.
I think I've honed in mostly on my analytical skills and kind of creating an argument that it can effectively deliver and convince someone of my point.
Something that I've learned is to look at other perspectives and then use that to make my response better.
One of the things we identified early on in the year are what are some essential writing moves we as a AP Language and Composition team want our students to use and leave the classroom with. So we ask students each week in their response to use one of these writing moves.
Typically, I go look at the writing move I'm supposed to use that week first, and then while I'm crafting my argument, I try to incorporate it in there or find a place that it would fit, and then kind of just try to work with it from there.
They highlighted the key writing move, they screenshot that, and they would submit it to me.
At first, for me, incorporating writing moves was kind of unnatural, and I was kind of just trying to put them in where I could, and it would usually sound pretty bad.
You could tell that students were using them to use the move in a certain way, like pushing the move into the writing.
But now that I've practiced them a lot, I feel like they flow smoothly into my writing.
One that we use a lot of in rhetorical analysis is something called a beyond that sentence starter. That allows students to add a little bit more nuance to their purpose or their actual argument, maybe how the pandemic has affected their mental state, and then they would add sort of layers of other more nuanced ideas using beyond that.
One of the writing moves that I have definitely struggled with before this year has been like incorporating semicolons and colons in general to make my writing more concise. By specifically focusing on different prompts with these, I've been able to also incorporate that in my writing in my class, which has been really helpful.
One that I've been using a lot is the double dash. It just looks good. I feel like it makes you look like a better writer, honestly.
We asked them to use a both and sentence. So maybe there were some topics that weren't clear cut for them. It wasn't like I stand on this side of the continuum for this argument. They would talk about those contrasting feelings with the both and sentence.
Our teacher has been really emphasizing the they say, I say structure, which is where you kind of have this like overall arguments and kind of acknowledging the other side when you respond, like on one hand, yet on the other hand. So I feel like I tend to use that a lot when responding. And specifically one of the prompts that I remember using this on is the cancel culture one, because my friends and I would talk about it a lot and we would all have like kind of the same ideas because like we're the same like friend group, so we have like confirmation bias, kind of that own little bubble. So being able to look at what other peers are saying was an interesting experience.
We talked a little bit about this idea of agreeing with a difference. So I agree with what you think, but I also think this. And so you add a little bit more of something that you believe that hasn't been covered already by someone in the conversation.
One that I've used recently is something called the gospel sentence. We just had a summative on Catcher in the Rye, and I was talking about mental illness and kind of how mental illness never changes, it never goes away. So I said, mental illness will never fade. And so that was just kind of a short, concise sentence that allowed me to kind of reinforce my point.
I started to see that some of those writing moves were naturally coming, not only in the New York Times, but in other pieces they wrote, because they were doing it every week. And they were just becoming much more honest writers. I think what makes the New York Times prompts special for us is that it's not confined to the four walls of the classroom, but really they began to see it as part of a national or global conversation that they were part of.
It's cool to see what other people are saying at your school that you would never like go up to them and converse about that topic.
I think one of the most interesting things on New York Times that I've seen is people from Brazil or Spain or Portugal that are commenting on these New York Times posts. It's kind of cool to see what their opinion are on some of these matters.
Looking at all the diversity in the comments and all that, you feel like you're actually talking to those people, or at least listening to them.
I think even for teachers, like having this as an assignment must be nice because you're kind of understanding like your students on like a much deeper level than just asking like basic questions like what's your favorite TV show?
I got to know a lot about them personally that may not have come out in a class conversation or even a one-on-one conversation with me. I could check in on them and because they had shared something like that and just make sure that they were doing okay.
English isn't necessarily my strongest subject, so to see that New York Times editors were approving of my work and publishing it, it kind of gave me a sense of confidence in my writing.
Voice is very hard to develop in writing. We start to see that at the end of the year, potentially in some students, but because they have this platform with the prompts, I started to see writers' voices kind of, spring up so much earlier, which was such an amazing thing to see for me as a teacher.